Hi there, BookTube. It's Roz, Scully Dangling About the Books.
And Tilly from Tilly's Shelf.
And what are we doing, Tilly?
We're discussing drama. We're having another discussing drama after another missed month. So 2022 has been a slightly patchy year. But this month we've got the best possible excuse to be talking about drama on BookTube, which is Shaketember.
It's Shaketember, yeah. A month of Shakespeare-y loveliness. Hosted by Jason of Old Blues Chapter and Verse, Lukas of the Cruel Reader's Thesis, and Rainey of Rainy Day Reads. And this week, their chosen play for the week is A Midsummer Night's Dream. So we got to reread it.
Yeah,
lucky us. So
and it's a lovely play. It's a really nice play. It may not be one of the absolute greats of Shakespeare. I don't think many people say that it's his best play. It's not a Hamlet or a King Lear or a really like worthy, meaty, deep play. But I've got so much affection for it. It's endearing, it's enjoyable, it's got a lot going on, it's entertaining. I think it's a good starter Shakespeare play.
Yes,
it's quite comprehensible as well.
And interesting when you say it's a good starter Shakespeare play. I don't know about other parts of the world, but certainly in the UK, it's seen as the right Shakespeare play to get school children to read.
Yeah, and I performed it when I was, about 10.
Yes.
Not all of it, obviously. I only performed one part of it, but
Yeah. But as we'll come on to say, it has some surprisingly dark and sort of sexual themes that you do think, is it really the most suitable play for
small children? Yes. It's got, issues of consent and things like that.
Well, it could be a great opportunity to raise some of those issues. Anyway,
a bit about the play then.
Yeah,
it's a multiple romances all intertwined into one comedic delight. So the framing story is Theseus and Hippolyta, and the idea is that the whole action of the play takes place between them sort of announcing the day of their wedding and the day of their wedding arrives, which is just a couple of days either side of Midsummer Night. And they are the leaders of Athens. Obviously Theseus is leader of Athens, Hippolyta is his recently conquered bride, so already there's a little bit of a power dynamic going on there, and they are kind of overseeing some other prestigious Athenian people, one of whom is Hermia, and the idea is that her dad wants her to get married to Demetrius, but Hermia really wants to get married to Lysander. Hermia's best friend Helena really wants to get married to Demetrius, and they were previously engaged, but Demetrius broke off the engagement. You've got already these sets of lovers with a little bit of romantic tension going on. And then they all go out into the woods, and in the woods we have fairies. We've got the Lord of the Fairies, which is Oberon, and his bride Titania, and they're in the middle of a row over over a changeling child. And so there's fairies running around everywhere, there's lovers running around everywhere, everyone's trying to find each other, and there's also just a slightly random group of working class Athenians who are generally called the Mechanicals, and they are trying to rehearse and put together a play to celebrate the Theseus and Hippolyta's wedding. So they're trying to do something that's going to impress the Duke, so they're also running around in the wood. And it's just a play about people getting lost in the wood all night long, and then it all ends happily.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you've got like three very different sort of communities, that interact, and two in the real world, and then one in the fantasy world. But the two in the real world are, poles apart in.
Yeah, they're equally separated almost in terms of their class and their status.
But they do all come together, and we get yet again we get a play within a play. Yes, don't we just love that?
We love a play within a play. One thing that I just wanted to go back to in terms of the having different levels or different kind of social groups is that I like how the layering kind of builds up over the play. So at one point towards the end, you actually have representatives from every group on stage in different places, and you know, some of them are asleep and some of them are active at the front, and some of them are you might have like Oberon observing something else happening, so that you get to see the kind of the way that the wood allows those different social groups to evaporate in a way so that they can all kind of interact in this magical world wood experience.
Yeah. And you said that you thought perhaps it wasn't one of Shakespeare's best plays, and I think in terms of the sort of the, you know, hugely deep, meaningful, you know, as you say, it's not Hamlet or King Lear or whatever, but on rereading it, I thought that technically it is one of his best plays. I was really impressed with, I think, with the structure. I mean, partly because it's like, it's, you know, it's intense over a short period, which is always a, you know, you know, an effective thing. It starts with an extraordinary, I don't know, succinctness, really. The first three scenes, we get introduced to those three groups. You know, we get the nobles, Theseus and the nobles. We get the mechanicals, and we get the fairies. So everything is put in place. All the bones of the plot and all the characters are put in place really early on, and then we see it all kind of play out. And I was really impressed. The other thing, you see, I'm very enthusiastic about this, having reread it, is the way he uses different how would you say it, different kind of styles of language and verse for those different
groups. And you can kind of
that.
recognize the fairy characters, and you can recognize the mechanicals, particularly by the way that they handle their speech and the way that they kind of the things that they talk about, the themes in the discussion. I think he gets a very good separation of different registers. Yes,
register is the word, isn't it? And the nobles and the fairies are generally in verse, and the mechanicals, you know, the ordinary people, that they're not, except when they're doing bits for their performance, and then they break into verse, as it were. So you get that. Really clear.
And you get also hints to the fact that they can't really, you know, the Theseus is there talking in verse like it's completely natural to him, and when the mechanicals try and talk in verse, they're really struggling with it, and there's he doesn't know where to put his stops. He's like a colt, he doesn't know how to stop. Because he doesn't know how to speak in verse.
So it as you say, you know, you can see this as a romantic play, because you get, you know, you've got all these relationships and you end up with happy endings,
weddings at the end. You
know, it's all weddings, and even Oberon and Titania, you know, are restored to each other's affections.
Although there's a slightly worrying, this changeling child has been kind of abducted effectively, but leaving aside, you know, that's like,
but as long as they're back together, then the child is with both of them. But it's not all sweetness and light, though, is it?
No. And I think you could easily play it in a way that was fairly sweetness and light, and I've seen this performed multiple times, and I've seen very light-hearted comedic performances of it. But I think if you wanted to play on the darker themes in a way that works for modern audiences, or a way that kind of is relevant to debates or things that people might experience today, as we've mentioned, you've got themes of consent, and there's also kind of the idea of party drugs comes into it. So if you haven't read the play and you're planning to read it this week, one of the things that happens is that the Oberon and his trusty assistant Puck, or Robin Goodfellow, has got a magical flower that can force people to fall in love with the first person that they see, and
when they go around
using this flower with reckless abandon and complete lack of any kind of caution, and using the effects of that flower to force people to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do if they were sort of in control of their control of their own mind, I suppose.
Yes, if they hadn't had a mind-altering drug.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess the idea of mind-altering drugs that people haven't chosen to take, that these lovers are completely taken unawares when they are drugged with the magic flower. So you could really play into that kind of quite concerning aspect there.
Absolutely. So that there's, and Oberon is in some ways quite a dark figure.
A dark and manipulative.
He's not cuddly fairy. There's some little cuddly peas blossom, and
they just kind of float around doing nice magic stuff.
It's like little butterflies, but he's dark, and
a bit sort of interfering, and a bit sort of like you wouldn't really want to get on the wrong side of Oberon, although in the play, like particularly at the end, he has this whole speech where he's like, oh, all of these lovers are going to be blessed, and their children are going to be blessed, and I'm going to make sure that they're okay. But the subtext to that is, I could definitely have made sure that they weren't okay.
Yes, I'm going to bless them. If I curse them, they'd know, And Theseus is, for me, quite a, he's a worrying character.
He's although she's presented as being, by the text, she's presented as being romantically attached to him. I feel like you could definitely play Hippolyta as a very threatened and traumatized bride, given that she is the spoils of war. They're getting married because he's defeated her, which is concerning, and so you can definitely see the concerning aspects towards Theseus's character.
But the flip side of that is there is loads of comedy in and that this is one of the few Shakespeare plays I've seen performed where I've literally been I was almost crying with laughter. In fact, I found I was laughing so much I couldn't breathe watching some of them, the scenes with the mechanicals. There is, it's so wittily written and borderly and cheekily written, and it lends itself to sort of actual physical humor as well, and it's not nasty about them, it's affectionate, and it actually gives them they're like likable, and they have their own kind of dignity, don't they? They make fools of themselves, but they're not seen as fools, or I don't know.
They might be seen as fools by the upper class characters from some of the comments that they make on the play, but there is kind of almost like an affectionate, good work, Moon, kind of, they're kind of a bit supportive to them as well.
And
seeing their display of kind of loyalty to the ruler at a time where in the UK we're seeing a change of ruler, and we're seeing a lot of I suppose discussion of monarchy and leadership, and how the public show their affection to those that are seen as being in charge of them. So I found it quite interesting to see how the mechanicals had that kind of passion they really wanted to stand up in front of Theseus and Hippolyta. They really wanted to get that prestige. They wanted to show their affection for them, but also wanted to say, I'm humble stout. I'm not, don't be worried about me being the lion. I promise it's all okay. And wanting to be recognized for who they are, as well as wanting to do something impressive for royalty, which I do see that as being quite a genuine way that listening to sort of radio accounts of, I saw the Queen at this point, and we did this big display for the Queen. You can just see that in the mechanicals.
And she told me that she enjoyed our performance, or yes, that's right. You're really right. I hadn't thought about that. And of course, this play was written, we're not exactly sure when, but probably 1595. So towards the end of Elizabeth's reign, but very much still in her, I suppose, her the Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, all of that. There's and there's a subtext there about the rightfulness of
of her
the
as a ruler, or the ruler.
Yeah. And although Titania, as a kind of fairy queen, is quite sexy, lusty,
Yeah, seems like it. Yeah, I mean, obviously for a period of the play she's been drugged, so you've got to recognize that. But yeah, she's a confident. You can definitely play her as like a confident female leader.
Yes,
who can kind of hold her own.
Yeah, I mean, I've also seen her be played as rather sort of ethereal and vague, but actually, I don't. That's not a reading that I like so much, I suppose. I think the other thing that is a huge, well, I would say that the characters, particularly of Hermia and Helena, they're two of my favorite female characters in Shakespeare, just because they really are like best friends. They're genuinely showed as young women. They're quite funny when they're fond, they're lovely. When they fall out, they're funny.
Yes, they have this really brilliant argument about when they're talking about one of them slightly shorter than the other, and like, this is because I'm short.
And you're making fun of me because I'm tall, and
yes. Just because I'm tall doesn't mean I can fight her. Help me.
So that's something that I yes, connect with.
That kind of female friendship in Shakespeare, it's not the most common thing that he presents. So
yes, so I enjoyed seeing that, and the sort of the way they're coming and going in the woods, and
that's fantastic. That's one of my favorite aspects, just people crossing and people being misled. And just on stage it works so well because it gives the play a lot of sense of momentum and in and out.
Yes, absolutely. And there's genuine emotion in the play. It's not all sort of just fun and games, as it were. You do feel that they're feeling these things. But the number one best thing about this play for me is some of the language, and it's got some of Shakespeare's most adorable bits of poetry, really.
And it's got some really gorgeous kind of nature related writing. One of the things I noticed reading it this time is that there's constant references to the moon, and it just like the moon just comes up all the time, but there's also a kind of like a smattering of references to kind of darker nature and snakes and asps and all of those kind of slightly threatening things that you can find in the woods, and you kind of get the sense that that represents the manipulative side of Oberon versus the kind of happy side of Peasbottom and whatever the other happy fairies are called. Cobweb, yes.
The seed.
And the vocabulary that they talk about the wood really does portray the wood as it is in the play, of like a place where wonderful magical stuff happens, but also some dark and mysterious in a bad way stuff is kind of lurking underneath.
But you can feel Shakespeare as the boy that grew up in the country in this play, can't you? When he talks about like bank of flowers and the smells and the sights, and I could picture a sort of an English sort of meadow, hedgerow bank. It's
the classic "I know a bank where the wild thyme blows." That kind of speech. Many others many others like it in the play. So one caveat for me, I guess, like we've said, the mechanicals incredibly entertaining. I like them. I've got an affection for them because I was Peter Quince, but I have to say that this time reading it, going from that kind of vocabulary and that woodland setting into the mechanicals play as the last scene in this play, it was a bit of a step down. Like, you've got this fantastic verse, and then you get this kind of farcical comedy, and the farcical comedy is great on stage, but for me as a reader, I was like, wow, this is amazing, this is quite funny.
Yeah,
Like
and
it was a little bit anticlimactic
Yeah,
in a way,
yeah.
in terms of the literary value of it.
That's fair. Although then we get, Puck gets to do his little roundup that pulls it all together, which is lovely. And I think but you're right, it's a play of a lot of contrasts, isn't it? And that's between the city and the woods, and between and light and dark, as you say, and yeah, there's many of those layers, and maybe you'd have liked it. I mean, I think the truth is that it's like happy endings are never as good as tragic, dreadful endings, are they? So,
Yeah, in Shakespeare plays, I think that's true.
Yeah, well, I don't mean in life, but I mean in Shakespeare.
Yeah, there's more power behind a tragical ending, and
Yes.
in a way the mechanicals play is a rounding off of we've just married off a bunch of people who might not actually work that well together, but let's have a funny play so that you forget about the slightly odd marriages.
Yeah. They are going to work really well because Oberon has
blessed them all. He's blessed them all, and some of them are still slightly under the influence of
these drugs. Yeah.
Drugs. So yes, slightly concerning for what happens if Demetrius ever accidentally gets undrugged. But we'll just leave that aside for now.
Leave it aside. So definitely a play that I could hand on heart, recommend.
I'd recommend it
and say, yeah, give it a go, or watch a performance or a film of it, or it's
like I said at the start, very beginner friendly. So if you've not read any Shakespeare before and you're looking at everyone doing Shaketember, I would say go for it with Midsummer Night's Dream.
Absolutely. Well, I think we should stop, and happy Shaketember, everyone.
Happy Shaketember, everyone, and thanks again to the host for picking such a lovely play.